Welcome to South Beach Sessions, the smile on my face. You haven't seen it that much, but we've got an old friend in the house. He's old and a friend, and he's also an old friend, and I want to make him comfortable because these things can get intimate and vulnerable. So I have a gift here. I've been thinking for weeks, how am I going to do this? I haven't seen him in a while. I haven't talked to him in person in a while, so here you go. I thought for a long time about how to do this correctly.
You really thought hard about this.
Yes. Are you still opening the mornings with one of those?
I do. Every morning, yeah. I've tried not to take them too far into the afternoon, but since I'll be up late tonight, I can have one.
Okay. And you have not yet quenched that habit. You haven't killed that habit, even though you should be drinking water. You're taking care of yourself. You look a lot healthier, as you always do, the moment that you get off of the sidelines.
I have had people say that. There is a lot less stress, but to be honest, with the weight loss, it was all medication, and it was all the having gotten so bad with my blood sugar that I was a type 2 diabetic. I got put on Mounjaro, and that's all I've done. I haven't changed my diet a whole lot, or anything else. So it's not really that I've done anything.
I have talked to you a great deal over the years about something that perpetually confounds me, which is you always returning to basketball when it seems to make you a good deal more miserable, when you are a balanced person who loves his family, and yet there's something about the misery and the coaching that is forever calling you. Have you sort of reconciled now that you're approaching government retirement age, even though you're going to keep working for a while, I imagine? Have you reconciled the fact that you've devoted your life to a thing that consumes you and is a forever pursuit, but also had a lot of stuff in it that you didn't like so much?
Yeah, I actually really regret that I didn't allow myself or didn't do what I needed to do to enjoy it more. I mean, because there's a lot about it that's good, and that's what draws me back all the time, the camaraderie of a team. And, I was just saying to Mike Ryan out here, you guys know what that feels like, the camaraderie of a team working toward a goal. I mean, there's nothing better than that. And the challenge of competition, it's addictive. And I really wish that I would have enjoyed it more in the moment and made it more enjoyable for the people around me, foremost my family, but even the people within the organizations that I worked in, that I would have made it more enjoyable for everybody around.
You're such a good learner, though. Why couldn't you?
That's a great question. I mean, maybe I'm not a great learner, but
no,
also,
you are. You are a great learner.
I just think in the moment, I don't know. I just couldn't enjoy it. And it's funny because I run into people all the time, who I'll meet for the first time and, will be talking to me and say, oh, that must have been so exciting. That must have been so fun. And I'm thinking, damn, it should have been.
Is it the pressurization of it all? So many people relying on you. The margins for winning can be so small. You have so little control as the coach, even though you guys are control freaks. You have so little control when the ball is out there. You're watching like the rest of us, no matter how much you've prepared. And I don't know how much impact you think you can have on the results, but the coach on the other sideline also thinks he's having. So what you end up doing is dedicating your life to a pursuit that's rewarding, fulfilling, but this is an affliction for most coaches, what you're talking about here.
Yeah, what really got me, Dan, is I don't care how good a job you do, and I should have understood this happens, but there will always be things happen in the game where I would look and go, damn, I didn't have them prepared for that. Or this was the wrong approach and I put us behind the 8 ball. And so that would happen even within the game itself. And then after the game, you go back and you look at the film and you can just line up the mistakes you made. And I'm talking about in your best game. I'm talking about you get a 30-point win and you're looking and saying, we weren't ready for that. They could have taken advantage for that. We got lucky. They missed here. And so in that pursuit of always trying to do things better, which I think is good, but to just be able to say, what I really wish I could have just said, okay, win or lose, what could we have done better? Let's approach that, and then let's move on, instead of it weighed me down. The mistakes, I mean, affected the way I thought about myself and everything else. And if you're not thinking well of yourself, then you're not happy. I mean, that's sort of the cycle that I went through.
I want to talk to you about joy because it is something that I have struggled with in my life through a series of family power patterns and embeddings that imprinted me, that once I got into marriage and later in life, I learned some things that I had to learn about making sure to slow down and try to find the gratitude in things that made me present, right? Because I can't tell you, even though I've heard that expression all my life about being present, I cannot tell you how much fear of the future or regret of the past are areas that plague people. And if you can just be in whatever moment you're in and summon a gratitude for that moment, that's what you're lamenting here, that you were you needed to get to the next thing, the next city, the next victory. And it just seems like, it really does seem like it should have been more enjoyable. You would have never dreamed at any point in your life that the Van Gundy name would resonate throughout basketball the way it does.
No, not at all. And the NBA was never something that I even thought about, other than to watch it like a fan. I mean, we came up, we both were small college players. My dad was a small college coach. I thought that's where I would be, and I would have been perfectly happy being there. And then through some lucky developments, you get a chance to be at this level. And I do appreciate that. I am grateful for that now. But as you said, in the moment, I didn't. In the moment, I regretted whatever mistakes I had made in the previous game and worried about what was coming up in the next game and what I needed to do. It was never about that moment. Other than, my brother has said, which is a great line, and it's really true, there's the best 5 minutes in life are after a great road win, and he laughs and says his daughter said, what about when we were born? And he said, I said what I said. Now I don't agree with that to that extent. But yeah, there are those brief moments after a great win where you feel good, but I didn't do it for long enough. Not that you're going to take a week while other games are coming, but take the night at least, and have a beer with your wife or something and enjoy it and get back to work the next morning. No, I mean, I was already on the mistakes of that game, even if we won, and what are we doing tomorrow to get ready for the next team. And that's just, I think most coaches are like that. I don't think I'm different than most guys.
What do you view as sort of your happiest year and your unhappiest year in coaching? I would imagine getting to the finals with Orlando.
Yeah. You know what, though? As I look back, actually, no. My happiest year in coaching was 1983-84, coaching Castleton State College. In 1984-85, 2 years there where coaching at Castleton was unbelievable. Good players, good teams, fabulous people who literally 2 weeks ago, 8 of them came down. Guys played for me 40 years ago, and 8 of them came down because, they knew I'd been through some things, and so they were going to spend an entire weekend with me, the weekend of the men's and women's Final Fours, and stayed with me. That group was really close. In the NBA, honestly, the most enjoyable year as a head coach was my first year, my year here, 03-04. We got off to an 0-7 start. We were 5-15, and then to come all the way back and win 17 of our last 21 and make it to the second round of the playoffs. And that was a group where a lot of guys were either getting their first opportunity. Obviously, it was Dwayne Wade's rookie year. Rafer Alston was really getting his first opportunity. Damon Jones, we had the year before and had that great, or we had, that year. And so guys were getting their first big opportunity to play. And it was just fun. I mean, it was, nobody had any real expectations on us. It was also Udonis's rookie year, Lamar Odom's first year and only year in Miami. I mean, it was just my most fun year in the NBA.
People love that team. 42-40. That team won a playoff series.
I mean, it was great. It went 7 games. The home team won every game. And I mean, Dwayne Wade's first ever playoff game, he hits a game winner. You know, I mean, there were just a lot of great memories. But again, and I love the staff. I mean, you know, it was Erik and Bob McAdoo, Keith Askins. You know, those guys were great, and people I still stay in touch with, like very, very much, and will always appreciate for the way they helped me through that first year. You know, there's no way I wouldn't have even made it through, let alone had any success without those 3 guys.
What do you regard as the worst of the years that you remember as like, man, that was a real suffering? I imagine the pressure in Detroit at some point when I was watching you from afar, because you had the whole organization on you, all the responsibility of that. It seemed from afar like that was a lot, even though you improved the team and it hasn't been as good since you left.
Yeah, listen, I mean, what got me there was when we got to that 2017-18 season, you know, coming down the stretch and trying to fight for a playoff spot and realizing in my own mind that probably what was on the line was the jobs of 50 people, because I was the president and I had all these people. And I know I've said this to you. I think what fans don't fully understand when they're screaming for the head of the coach and the guy to be fired, and we're going to have it come up at the end of these playoffs with a lot of NBA coaches, I don't expect them to worry about the head coach. Like, we're set. We make great money. It's not a problem. But in my case there, I had 50 people who were going to lose their jobs. And a lot of those people are making $50, $60, $70,000.
And you know their families.
Right, absolutely. You know their families, and they've got young families and all of that. They're going to be out the door too. And that's not fans' responsibility. I just think when fans get so vicious about it, they don't have that perspective. And it really pisses me off with the media sometimes, who are doing the coach on the hot seat bit and the whole thing. And I know I've said this to you too, but, you know, back when there were so many media layoffs, and I'm not even talking as much people behind the mics, but back when the written part of like ESPN, you know, laid off a lot of writers and stuff. And, you know, they expect us to all feel sorry for them. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're the guys who want to spend half your career writing about how coaches should lose their jobs. Well, here you are. So a little more sensitivity to, you know, the guy in the video room. Maybe I deserved to lose my job in Detroit. The guy in the video room didn't. He busted his ass. He was in there every damn day for 14 hours doing a great job. And he's being punished for my decisions. Like, let's tone down the, you know, excitement over people losing their jobs.
You mentioned Spoelstra. Could you see it early with him? Was it that obvious?
It was. And I will, you know, I know that's hard for people to believe, but I remember having been here only a couple of months. And I remember saying to my wife at home and to my brother and father, who obviously are basketball people, like, this guy's great, you know, and I've only done that. You know, he was early in his career, obviously right at the beginning. And I did that one other time, and it was with Sean Miller when I was at Wisconsin, and I was only months on the job, and I was like, whoa, this is a different level. And I think what amazed me is when I came here, I'd already been in college coaching for 14 years. So I was new to the NBA, but I wasn't new to coaching. And to see somebody in their first job who had his intelligence, his knowledge of the game, his approach, and players immediately trusted him. Like, he would go work with them, and he just had this air about him. The thing with Erik, and I think players still catch on to it with him, it's always about them and about making the team better. It's never about him. And so I think they are attracted to that right away. And then his competence he can go out there and teach you and help you get better. Yeah, I saw all of that right away. And then just his demeanor. I mean, he's not like me. He's not with the ups and downs. He may be internally, but externally, he's very even keel. And so, yeah. Now, if you had asked me at that time, this guy's going to be a Hall of Fame guy and go to 6 finals in 13 years and all of that, do you see that? I mean, who the hell knows? But was he going to be a great coach? Yeah.
You mentioned his competence. I remember his confidence and being struck by the idea that he would say flatly in his first year, "It is not my job for them to like me. It doesn't matter. Stop. Like, don't ask me questions about that. Don't care whether they like me. That has nothing to do with my job."
No, that's exactly right. And I think, one of the things, and we were both here together for a long time. And the one thing that has really stuck with me about player-coach relationships, Pat Riley said when we were here, and he would say it a lot, is the player-coach relationship is a business relationship that is designed to get a result. That's what it's about. And, my brother talks all the time about if you want to know what how good a guy's relationship is with his players, watch him on the court, because that's what matters. It's not whether the guy likes you, doesn't like you. Does he go out there and perform? If he does, the player-coach relationship's outstanding. If he doesn't, he may be saying, God, this guy's my favorite coach ever, and he's playing like crap, then the player-coach relationship isn't working. The personal relationship maybe, but not the player-coach relationship. And I think a lot of people in the media get that wrong. Like, they just want to go ask, do you like a guy? Do you not like a guy? And then, the players in the locker room don't like him. Really? Well, his team's winning all the time. So something's working. And Erik has understood that from the get-go. And listen, human nature, we all want everybody to like us. I mean, it's not like he doesn't care. I think people, when he makes a comment like that, people will think he doesn't care if people like him. Of course he cares. He's just able to look past that and understand that's not what's important here in the business of me coaching the team.
Who's more joyless about the coaching process, you or your brother?
Oh, God, that's a hell of a question. I don't know. I would think that we're about the same. We were just so different temperamentally. I mean, I sort of wear my emotions on my sleeves. Jeff's very, composed. And so, but I would say we're pretty much the same. I really think if somebody would give him another chance, I honestly do think that he would be different with all of that. I do. I think that he's a more intentional learner maybe in that regard, and I think he would be different.
That's a cop-out. You're a media member now. You got to take a stand. You can't have nuance.
But I don't really know. I really don't know.
Well, does he articulate the same sort of remorse about, I wish I had enjoyed it more?
Yes, oh, absolutely. We talk about that all the time. Like, from our background to get to where we were and to not have an appreciation for that. We do appreciate, like we will talk among ourselves, and I certainly have this feeling all the time of, even now, even just sitting courtside broadcasting a game is like, how in the hell did I get here? Like, I was a nondescript small college player. I'm coaching at the hell, I'm coaching in the NBA. The moment where I really remember it, my first year as a head coach here, our 7th game of the year. And the reason I remember it was the 7th game is he took us to 0-7 at the start of my career. We were in Houston. And what I remember the moment of lining up for the national anthem and looking down and seeing him on the other end and thinking like, you gotta be kidding me. And I, even at that point, even with the game coming up, I had to fight back the tears at that point of just thinking like, this is amazing. I mean, I'd already had the tears when he first got named the head coach. his first home game, they beat I think it was his first home game. I know it was his first home win. They beat Jordan's Bulls, and the crowd in Madison Square Garden was chanting his name. And I was watching on TV, and I got the tears then. But to be in the same game with him, now I did think though, he knew I was struggling. I'm starting my career at 0-6. He could have given us one. He could have given us one. If he really gave a crap, sit a couple guys out, get me my first win, and then go on about. I mean, he could have done that. He didn't. So there are limits to his love for me, and I learned that at that moment.
You guys didn't talk. I've read this before, that the only time that you didn't talk is when you were an assistant coach with Miami and he was the head coach of the Knicks. You went a period of time where the battles were so excruciating and the scars so deep and the competition so crazy that is that the only time in your life where you've had an extended period where you did not speak?
Yeah. And, you remember those series and especially the one where, everything happened with Alonzo and, even before we had the fight where they had guys suspended for games, the only time we beat them in that rivalry because they didn't have guys for game 7 and the whole thing. I mean, it was so fraught with emotion that it was just better because we're not going to see things the same way at that point. And to be honest, we still don't talk about
really
any of those games.
The Heat Knicks stuff still hurts.
No, we'll talk about it generally in terms of the respect we have for people on both sides. Like when I saw Sprewell the other day, and I know how much he meant to Jeff and the whole thing. And then Jeff would obviously, when Tim Hardaway was working for me, he'd see Tim all the time. I mean, there's great respect. And so we would talk about that, but never getting back into the specifics of games and the whole thing.
Well, what's the story that you can tell me through your eyes? You're watching this insanity where it keeps getting ratcheted higher and higher, and now you look at on the court, and your brother is on the court holding on to Alonzo Mourning's, the bottom half of his leg because he's just trying to stop the fight. And these are giant people and everyone's going crazy. And Jamal Mashburn's on the court and he says Zoe's calves are so big that he's like, why is Jeff Van Gundy holding on to a horse's leg? It doesn't make any sense to me. Through your eyes as you're watching the intensity of all that and an embarrassing moment for your brother and you love him, what did all of that look and feel like to you?
Well, in the moment, to be quite honest, all I thought about is, shit, we're going to lose Alonzo for the next game. That's seriously, you're into that competition so much that's all I was thinking. We're going to lose Alonzo. Damn it. This is crazy. It was after the series ends and everything else. And then even now you'll see that replay and people think it's funny and they'll want to revisit it with me. And it's excruciating for me. Like it's embarrassing for him and it's excruciating. And so I don't like it. I mean, because it was a bad moment for me and the team I was with. And it was a bad moment for my brother. There's not a positive in that. So that's just something I try to put out of my mind.
But you don't reach out to him or anything? You just how long did you guys go without speaking?
Until the series was over. That's it. And then it's congratulations and move on. But we've never specifically spoken about that moment. Like I never specifically said,
really?
What were you thinking? I've never asked him, how he processes that or anything. No, I just put it out. I mean, those were not good memories. I mean, especially not for me. I mean, they were beating other than the 1 year where we caught him on the injuries, they were just beating our ass every year. I mean, and he would just come in and beat us. I mean, we're the number 1 seed. They're the number 8 seed. They beat us. And, so I'll be honest. I mean, I love my brother, but it's not fun for me to look back on that. Even as an assistant coach, I mean, he was taking it to us. He was getting the best of us. I'd rather get on to other memories.
I remember the first time I ever heard your gravelly voice. You were an assistant coach and you were an outspoken and opinionated assistant coach. And you were on WQAM with Joe Rose. And I had just written something about somebody, Jamal Mashburn. I had just written that he got torched by somebody who ended up going 12 for 28 or something. and you just excoriated me on the radio. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's ridiculous. The t. And I'm like, who is this person? And why are assistant coaches allowed to be so opinionated publicly? I thought Riley had a grip on some of this sort of stuff. But I liked you immediately. Like, I liked immediately that there was somebody with the Miami Heat near a microphone and having a strong opinion about things, that you would have that strong a voice that you've carried into adulthood and used for some very good causes.
Well, I think one of the things, I've said this to people at the time, I honestly think that one of the reasons that you and I became friends and that I liked you is my experience with the media even today is the media is great at handing out criticism, and they're the most sensitive people in the world if anybody criticizes them. And you have never shied away from any of that. Like, people, I've always been able to argue with you, even criticize you, and you're okay with that. That gives me respect for people. People, to me, like, who can understand it goes both ways. That's great. It's the way it should be. The people that want to be one-sided, like I said, the media people who want to scream about all these coaches should be fired, but then when they get laid off, we're all supposed to throw a pity party from them. No, screw you. Like, it doesn't go that way. It's got to go both ways, you know? And
but you passionate. But when you get passionate about injustices or inconsistencies or these kinds of hypocrisies, like this is what I've enjoyed about you since the beginning, is that you get fired up and you immediately ratchet it up to a place of, this is not right and I need to say something.
I don't know that one thing I have come to grips with that my wife really taught me over the last couple of years of her life was that. I don't need to say something. Like, you don't need to comment on this. And you should stop and think, like, do I want to weigh in here? I generally, as you know, because I have said some things that have gotten me into some trouble, I don't take the time to think. This is what I'm thinking, and I'll say it. And so guys like you like that, but I can get myself into some trouble with that. So I don't need to say it. And I do better if I at least stop to think, is this something I should weigh in on? Like, she got me to get off of Twitter because, as you know, I was on there all the time and I was arguing with everybody. And she said, it's making you more and more unhappy. And that's as simply as she put it. She said, what do you think you're getting out of it? And I just stopped. And I haven't been on, I don't know, a couple of years. Because that wasn't a platform that I needed. I too often don't think before I speak.
This is a lament you've articulated a lot to me over the years. I didn't realize that you had indeed learned it. Was that
Well, I don't know that I've learned it. I did learn it. I've gotten better, but there's still times that, I'll just spout off, but I will at least now. I probably won't do it 2 days in a row at least, now, because I'll catch myself and say, that's one to walk away from. My brother catches me on stuff too.
He's much more careful than you.
He is much more careful. And there are ways, what he has said to me, even with the basketball stuff I do, is there are ways to make your point without going too far and without being negative. Quick example, we're doing this Heat Celtics series, and, the big lament is from Miami's side, and I get it, Jimmy Butler's out. He's their best player, and they can't possibly win without him. Well, over the last 3 years, which is a pretty big sample size, and Jimmy's missed a lot of games, the Heat have won 58% of their games with Jimmy Butler and 56% of their games without Jimmy Butler. And I said to my brother, just thinking, if the guy's that big a star, shouldn't there be a bigger difference? And he said, maybe, but you don't need to say that. Just put the fact, this is it. Over the last 3 years, they've won 58%. And without him, they've won 56%. And you don't need to go farther. He said, when you go farther and you draw the conclusion, you're an asshole. But when you put the facts out there, it's just the facts. That is the facts. The Heat may not like him. Jimmy may not like him. But those are the facts.
Oh, you've gotten very good at this, though. I don't want anyone to dilute how opinionated you are. I don't know that I would say that you're better than your brother, although I like your style a lot. My wife, who doesn't like sports, walked past the television the other day and said, "Is that Stan?" And I was just made really happy by the fact that she heard your voice. You've gotten very good at this, and I'd argue that your barbed wire edge is something that serves you, that all broadcasters are disliked. Your brother has his critics. If you're against somebody's team or you say the wrong thing, you're going to be somebody who's going to get criticism. But I like your way of doing it.
Yeah, I don't think he was trying to change me on that. It's just, I don't need to run down a player. I don't need to run down Jimmy Butler. Like, it's a surprising fact is what it is. And I think his point is the fact is enough right there. Like, yeah, no, you can have opinions like, hey, I think this guy hurts his team because he doesn't run back on defense enough, or I don't think this guy puts in the defensive effort, which in the past, not lately because he's changed, but in the past, I've made the point doing Luka Doncic's games that I think this guy's the best offensive player I've ever seen in the NBA. But part of the reason his team doesn't win is he doesn't put enough into it. That's an opinion that's fine, but there's times where you can go over the edge to where you're just running somebody down in sort of an unfair way. And you don't really know. Like, I haven't gone into any deep analysis of why there isn't a big gap between Jimmy Butler playing and Jimmy Butler not playing for the Heat. I mean, maybe the schedule's been, I haven't done that. And until I do, I shouldn't jump to that conclusion. But I certainly should point out, wow, like, there's only a 2% difference in winning percentage when he plays and doesn't play. Like, you look at Joel Embiid, and they basically are the best team in the NBA this year when he plays. And they are Brooklyn or Charlotte when he doesn't play. Okay, that's what you'd expect. And Jimmy Butler's certainly a great player. I'm not trying to say he's not. He is. And so you'd expect there would be a big difference. So what does it say? Well, it says a lot of things. It may say something about Jimmy, but it certainly speaks some very positive things about the other Miami Heat players, about Erik Spoelstra, about their roster, their toughness, their approach. So there's a lot of things it says. And to just use it to try to run down another guy, that wouldn't be good.
Your brother was let go by ESPN. He was very classy about it, quiet. I don't think he had anything to say about it. Understands that it's a business, but I understood at ESPN that it was a business too, and it didn't make it hurt less when I was caught off guard by that. What do you say to him in that spot when he leaves ESPN? Do you have anything to give him solace?
Well, I don't know that I could give him solace, and he was hurt by it. I mean, he'd worked for them for 17 years, and it wasn't even just the fact that they made the move. I mean, they shit on him. I mean, the timing was awful. They waited until basically the NBA market in terms of coaching jobs, assistants jobs, front office jobs was already gone by to make the move. And then they, delayed on a buyout that would free him to work for people. I mean, after 17 years of being in arguably, I don't even know if it's arguably, the best, game broadcast booth in the business in basketball, and being the kind of person he is, ESPN shit on him. And so all I could do was basically tell him that that's how I saw the situation, and I felt awful for him. Listen, you're in this business and you're the same. I mean, this stuff happens in business. We've all been through it. We've been fired and everything else, but there's ways to do it. And and ways not to do it. I mean, I've been fired 4 times as a coach, and the one in Detroit, the guy handled it great. I mean, and so I feel a lot differently about him than I do about the other 3. And I thought ESPN was absolutely miserable to him after what he had given them for 17 years.
I'm thinking he would advise you not to say any of that.
Oh yeah, and he would be upset when he finds out that I said it. He'll be upset, and that's okay. I mean, it was like the other day, Jose Pineda, who the Spanish broadcaster for the Miami Heat, he said to Brian Anderson before the game, he said, "Hey, when you guys say the Heat are undermanned," he said, "Erik doesn't want you to say that. He doesn't like it if you say that." And I'm thinking like, okay, I love Erik, but they're still undermanned and we're still going to say it. So, yeah, my brother wouldn't be happy if I was saying this, but it's what happened, and that's what I'm going to say. And you know what? I don't think anybody who knows the situation would disagree with me at all.
You guys don't have a whole lot of fights for brothers. When did that stop?
We had a lot of them growing up. I think certainly in our adult life, and probably even when we were younger, though we did have fights, we're far more apt, and I'm sure you were like this with your brother too, we're far more apt to fight for each other than against each other. We'll have our arguments and disagreements, and maybe one of the things that I appreciate most, and it's hard to say because I appreciate everything about him, but everybody in their lives needs people, in my opinion, who will tell you the truth. And my brother will tell me the truth, like whether it's with coaching or with my family or with anything else. He's not afraid to say to me like, "Hey, I love you, but that was some bullshit right there," and I appreciate that, because you absolutely need that. And it gets harder and harder. If somebody's in your position now, Dan, you're running this big company, or me when you're a head coach, there's fewer and fewer people who feel comfortable to tell you the real deal, right? And maybe they're depending on you for their jobs or whatever. And to have him to say, "You know what? No, that's some bullshit," or even just simply, "You're wrong on that. Step back and think on that. You're wrong." And I greatly appreciate that with him. So I would not say that we have any fights now, but that doesn't mean that, that he won't be honest with me and disagree on things and put me in my place.
Do you have anything in the way of a memorable example that stays with you on something that just that made you notice what you're articulating now, which is, oh, there is a person who will tell me like it is differently than others will?
Well, I'll give you a simple one. When you're coaching and, at the end of quarters, we still see it in NBA games. You do the coach's interview, and sideline reporter comes over. They ask you a couple questions. Should be pretty simple. But you can think of examples of some NBA coaches who are maybe not sideline reporter friendly and the whole thing. And I was never, in my mind, I was never that bad, but I was certainly short and surly and wanting to get back in the huddle with my team. And Lisa Salter was working for them. I believe it was Lisa Salter working for ESPN at the time. And they were having us in the playoffs. And he said, "Look, you gotta change on those end of quarter interviews. Like, put yourself in her shoes. Like, those aren't fun to do. They know you guys don't want to do them. It's her job. Give her the respect of answering the questions." And I changed for the rest of my career the way I did those interviews, because basically what he said was, stop being an asshole. Like, you've got to do them. She's got to be there. Treat her with some respect. And he could have just let that go. It wasn't a big deal. But number one, he stepped up in defense of his teammate, and he let me know. So to me, he did right by both of us.
How would you articulate to someone who doesn't understand the way that you love your brother?
Boy, it's outside of my wife and my kids. It's the strongest. No offense to my parents, but it's the strongest relationship of my life. I mean, literally. I mean, the very few days that we have that we don't talk. I mean, we probably talk 5 or 6 times a week, and there is no question in my mind, never has been, that at a time of need he wouldn't drop literally everything in his life and be there for me. I mean, there's just I know that he would put his interests ahead of mine at any given moment. I know that there's
Behind yours, not
yeah,
his
right.
interest.
He would put his behind.
Right.
And I know that he always has my best interests at heart. Even if he's telling me something I don't want to hear, he's not thinking of himself. I can't remember a moment in our adult lives where I even had an inkling that he was even having any selfish thought in any dealing with me whatsoever.
There is not a relationship like that one. I'm being reminded of it as you talk about it. I didn't quite realize that there was no other relationship that I had like the one with my brother. I wasn't. I hadn't given any consideration to the idea that it would ever be gone. You know. When you articulate it like that, I just didn't quite know how much I'd miss it, because I never considered the idea that he was my little brother, that I'd have to, you know. Just floored me, caught me off guard, has made it's just I've had a lot of trouble with any amount of enthusiasm for anything since it. And you had the team that you coached in 1983 and 84. It was doing a lot of lifting when you said that they came to your aid in a time of need, or you said you were going through some stuff. And I've sort of been there since you said it, because I've needed to lean on some people since August because of the impact of that particular loss, and just not. Also, no offense to my parents, there was just nothing like that in my life.
Well, I think it's partially your parents are a different relationship. I mean, you love them, but there's still that authority figure relationship, where you're on an equal level with your siblings, and your experiences, you go through them relatively together. You go through your lives together. What was the age separation?
4 years. I was 4 years older.
We're 2.5. And so you went through everything together. And I remember even when we were younger, like, it was different even than a lot of my friends. Like, I remember my friends' younger siblings, but they weren't with us all the time. My brother was always with us. I was a senior in high school. He was a freshman. So we were 3 years apart in school. And he hung with us all the time. When we'd go to other areas and play pickup games and things like that, my brother was with us. I mean, I had a lot of really good friends growing up, my teammates mainly, and I still see them, which is fantastic. But my brother was always with us. So he was at every point in my life, other than my wife, once I met her, he was my best friend. I mean, he's been with me every step, everything that has happened, good or bad, in my life. He's been the first or second person who I've called at every one, either to get support or to celebrate with or whatever.
I have tried to support you during some of your difficulties. You can be a little bit evasive that way. I don't know how you've been coping with your own grief. I did want to talk to you about that privately or publicly if you've learned anything, or if and forgive me, I should tell the audience that you lost your wife, Kim, in August.
Yeah, in August, and she took her own life, Dan, and I'll I'll never there's I don't care how long it goes. I can't imagine that I'll ever get over that. I mean, it's um, I it just it was devastating, and like we'd been married for 35 years and had been together for close to 40 years. I mean, since I was 24 years old. I mean, I just sort of like what I said with my brother, but with her, my entire adult life. I mean, I trace everything: job changes, kids, everything. I mean, I was with her, and she was by my side. And just what you said about your brother, I never ever envisioned that I was going to live another day in my life without Kim. Never envisioned that. And I knew she was, going through a tough time, but I still never envisioned that happening. And even now, it's been 8 months, and I struggle to come to grips with the fact that I'm never going to see her again. And I'm trying hard. You can relate to this, I'm sure. I'm trying hard to stay connected. I don't want to, my house is full of pictures of Kim. There's a montage of pictures above my bed that my kids did for me of Kim. And I'm trying hard to remember her voice and to remember her smile and all of those things. But more than anything, to live her values, because her values were better than mine. She taught me a lot, and I want to live her values in a life that she would be proud of. And my kids at times over the last 8 months, at times, not often, but I think genuinely from their point, I'll do something and they'll say, Mom would have really been proud of you for that one. And that, above anything else, really makes me feel good, because my wife was an incredible person and the loss is huge. But I have other people that I care about. And as you said, I've had a lot of people support me, and I've got to try to go on. But I know I'll never get away from it. I'm doing as much therapy as I possibly can. I don't think my guy can do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with me. He's got to have other people, which, but I'm doing as much as I can. And I know that I'll get better. I have confidence in that over time, but I think the regret, and I just don't think I'll ever get over it.
I'm so sorry.
As I am with you. I mean, the loss is just, and the thing is, Dan, I think, and I'm sure I'm not that much older than you. Um, the one thing I was saying to my brother lost his best friend in Houston a week ago to cancer, and they were really, really close. And he went back on Friday to see the family. So it hasn't even been a week since he's gone back. And, I said to him, unfortunately, this is going to be a big part of our lives now. I mean, I'm 64. I remember probably even 10 years back, my dad's 88 now, and I remember him saying to me, yeah, funerals are a big part of our lives now, and it's just, wow. And I'm starting to feel like that. And not just people dying, but how many people I know, some of my ex-players from college and stuff living with cancer, and that's scary. I mean, we always have that in our life, but it's usually, I've had very little tragedy in my life until my wife died. Very little. I mean, I've just been blessed. But as you get older, man, it's just all around you and it becomes part of your life. And it's one of the things I'm trying to deal with in therapy, besides the loss of my wife. Like, how do I deal with this? Like, you brought up the word joy before. Where's the joy in life? Like, how do you go on day to day? How do you find stuff to do? Like, I can function. I don't know about you, but I can get up and function every day. I do what needs to be done. I don't have that much I want to do right now. And how do you have that when you're just seeing tragedy and death and sickness all around you? And I know that's going to be a huge part of my life now.
Had you tried therapy before?
Yeah. I've never been afraid of therapy, but I've never embraced it like this. Never embraced it like this. I don't know where I'd be without it, to be quite honest. I need somebody to be able to talk to. And like, I don't want to burden my family with it, because look, you know this as well as I do.
Oh, but
you're sad every day.
But that's such a mask, though. These people, people want to love you.
But again, they do, and they can love you, but you can only go so far with it, right? Because you understand this. You're sad every single day.
Yeah, you wake up with a sickness in the morning. It greets you as soon as you get up.
And so if that's what you're going to talk to everybody about all the time.
Oh, no, I can't do that.
That's what I'm saying. If somebody's going to say, how are you? And it's, well, I'm not doing good all the time. Man, I mean, I don't want to bring everybody else down. And even with my kids, I don't know where they are every single day. So it's not like I'll never tell people something.
But I can imagine you putting on a brave face for your kids because you got to feel like you got to move on and be strong.
I don't know that I put on a brave face. I never feel like I'm faking anything. I'll just try to tap into other parts of me, so I'll never try to act like I'm happier than I am. But when I see my kids or when I talk to my kids, that does make me happy. So I want to tap into that. Occasionally I'll say to them, hey, yeah, I've really been having it rough lately. For some reason in February, the 6-month anniversary of my wife's death hit me. I don't know why. I'm not usually that much into, the death, the dates, but it hit me, and I said that to my kids, and I've had people willing to help me. I don't feel like I'm hiding anything, but at the same time, like, if you want people to be there for you, this is the way I feel anyway, and support you, you don't want to make that support be the most miserable damn thing in their life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had these players come down, which is one of the kindest acts for guys that I coached 40 years ago, to spend the weekend with me. And they all asked, and very genuinely, how are you doing? Well, if I'm going to sit there and, burden them the whole weekend, well, hell, I mean, I don't want it to be like that. Now, I didn't lie to them. I said, like, it's been rough. I mean, but you guys coming down here makes it a lot better. That type of thing.
Rough, though, is not quite encompassing enough for what you specifically endured. It's realms beyond rough.
But again, it's, with my therapist, it's fine. And I can get in deep into that hurt and grief and regret and all of that. But I really just don't I really don't want to go to those depths with anybody else. I don't. I don't think it would be good. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it would be good for my relationships. Like and I don't think this is bad. And look, everybody's different, but what's keeping me going is mainly my kids, and feeling a responsibility to them, wanting to help them through all of this, trying to take on some of the things that my wife did for them. That's important to me. I don't consider that a burden or a job. That's what keeps me going. I don't want them to be caretakers of me. I don't want that. I don't see that as their role as kids. Even though they're grown, that's my role as a parent. And then my parents are in their 80s. They don't need to be burdened with that. There's enough of a burden I know they worry about me, and all of that. I want to be there for them. And it's not me being selfless or anything else. In some ways, it's selfish. I need that. I need to take care of other people right now. My parents, Kim's parents, my kids. I need to take care of other people. Without that, I don't know that I would find much purpose in getting up every day.
You mentioned regret, and one of the stages of grief is obviously guilt. And I've told the listeners and the viewers of this before, that in the horror that was visiting my brother's deathbed for a year, the thing that I was able to get that you can't get in the suddenness of what you experience, because I think what you got is the worst way to get that. I don't have a guilt yet. I don't want to be flippant about it and assume it's never coming, but I have not yet had guilt because I was able to show up every day and say all the things. And there was warning, even though what I was watching still seemed inconceivable as I was in it. There was warning of, hey, time is short. Here's the most overt way we can show it to you. Say the things that you need to say. And so I can't imagine, and I don't know any of the details. You and I have not talked about any of this, but I can't imagine if that was a falling out of the sky surprise to you. The finality of that from one second to the next, I just can't imagine how one has the tools for something like that to avoid guilt and regret about the things that you want to say now that you can't.
Well, I don't know either, to be quite honest. I mean, because I don't have those tools to be able to do it. The way I looked at it as I was blessed with an unbelievable woman and a great family. And my responsibility in this life, my primary responsibility was, and is to this day, but was to take care of those 5 people. And I, in every way possible. And my wife reached a point of despair and hopelessness and whatever else, where her life and her life with me was not worth living anymore. And my responsibility was to take care of her and to give her a great life. And I failed in that. And
come on, Stan.
No, but I know, like, listen, my therapist will tell me, no, it was mental illness and it was this. And you understand all this too. You're a very smart guy. Like, on an intellectual level, I get that. I get that he's right. But what I'm saying to you is not that I'm correct in my feeling, but that's my feeling. And there's a difference between my head knowing that this was a true illness going on with her, that's different than what my gut tells me every single day. So I can be on a Zoom call with my therapist and know what he's telling me is right. And an hour later, it doesn't feel that way. That's what I can't reconcile is the feeling. So he says over time that will get better and I will be able to come to grips with the reality of what happened and that there wasn't anything more I could have done. But I don't know that I'll ever feel that way. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to say that I'm right and it was on me. But in my gut, that's the way it feels. That's the heaviness that I feel on top of just wanting to share my life with her. Like, and I know you feel that with your brother. Like, and it's not even just big events. It's mundane things. I mean,
It's
I
just coming
remember,
home. It's
I
just coming home.
yes, I was at the NCAA tournament. We're working the NCAA tournament in Connecticut. UConn beats Iowa State in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. We're coming back to the hotel. I'm with Kevin Harlan and Dan Bonner. And then our producer, Ken Mack, and our director, Mike Arnold. Those guys wanted to get everybody together and we have dinner and, whatever, watch some of the late games that night because we had an early one. And the whole thing. So we're coming up the elevator and Kevin Harlan just really innocently said, yeah, I'm just going to go up and change and call my wife and then I'll come down. And I went back in my room and cried and God, I hope Kevin doesn't hear this. He'll feel bad about it because he's that nice a guy and that sensitive a guy. But I just, because I couldn't call my wife and just say, hey, we're done. We're going to go down and have dinner. There was nothing momentous. It wasn't like a big deal. It wasn't like, wow, this is great. I want to share it with her. Or this is awful. I need support. It wasn't that. It was just, he was going to do what he's probably done after every game in his life is I'm going to go back and call my wife and then I'll go have some dinner. And I missed that. I wanted to be able to call my wife and say, hey, we're done for the day. I'm going to go have dinner and I'll see you tomorrow.
You're being an asshole to yourself, though. You're not being gentle or kind to yourself when you frame it as her life with me and I failed. When you say that she ended her life with me and I failed, you're making yourself there. You're intellectually attaching a culpability to that verbally that.
But I don't think that's not really true though, Dan. I think what I'm trying to tell you is that actually intellectually I understand that that's not the case. I understand that it's the mental illness. I do. All I'm trying to tell you is when I wake up in the morning, when I go to bed at night, my feeling is that. So that's a different thing. I'm not attaching an intellectual culpability to it. It's an emotional thing that no matter how much I know, it just doesn't feel that way. It feels like I let her down and in the process let my kids down and even let myself down. And it's the feeling. I'm not saying that's the way it is. I'm not saying even that I believe, because belief's an intellectual thing. I'm not even saying that I believe that's the way it is. I'm saying it feels like the way it
I've
is.
always sort of prided myself, erroneously, I would say, but proudly, on being head over heart, thinking that there's not anything that can't be intellectualized, and what you're articulating is absolutely one of those things that you could go to your therapist, you can go and ask for help and for tools, and they will tell you time. And you're more optimistic than me when you say, well, I know I will feel better, because I'm like, will I? When does that start happening?
I can't say that I know. I'm trying to go with confidence and I'm trusting a mental health professional who's been through it many times. I don't think any other time in my life have I better understood the difference between the intellectual and the emotional. And the intellectual sort of keeps me going right now to sort of know what the facts of the situation are, because emotionally I can't get there.
You trust your head too, right? Your
I
head
do.
gives you the illusion, gives
I
one
do.
the illusion of control.
No, that's exactly right. And probably to a fault. I've always trusted, as you said, I'm with you. I've always trusted the rational, the logical over the emotional.
What a terrible thing to learn, though, that you can't override it. That, like, wait a minute.
My wife tried to teach me that for years and years and years and years. That, you know, and I think one of the big problems I had, even in, you know, my relationship with her, is she would say to me at times, you know, tell me how she felt. And I would come back to her with a very rational, you know, I'd give her the facts of the situation, and I would give her the solution
Yeah, fix it.
to everything. And she would always say to me, you just don't get it. I'm telling you how I feel. Well, and this is a big regret of mine now. I get it now. I get it. I get the difference now. I do. I get it.
I think I just tried to do it with you a second ago by telling you, by trying to fix you being mean to yourself, or not being able to, not being able to harness this feeling that forces regret on you, or makes you bad to yourself because you're just sort of overwhelmed by something that doesn't have a precedent, right? Because I had been blessedly free of grief, and in some ways I don't want to even verbalize it, wasn't preparing for my parents, but they're in their, they're approaching 80. And so somewhere in my head, I'm not being a fool about that, but to get blindsided over here, to not have considered.
I know. I mean, I remember, and it was less than a week. My wife and I had gone with our 4 kids and some of their friends, boyfriends, fiance, the whole thing. We had just gone to Switzerland and Italy, and we had gotten back 9 days before my wife took her life. And we were sitting out by our pool less than a week before it happened. And we were sitting out there on it was warm, obviously, it's August, but a beautiful night. And we're sitting out there, and we were talking about how lucky we had been in our lives and with our family. So my wife, her parents divorced really young, but both her dad and her mom remarried, and are in marriages of over 50 years. My parents have been together 65 years. My wife has 3 brothers and 2 sisters, all married with kids, no divorces. All the kids are healthy. My brother and his wife have been married 34 years, will be 35 in August. His 2 daughters are doing well. All of our parents, literally there's no problems. Now, we've had friends. I had 3 players now from my days back at Castleton who passed away, 2 of them in their 20s years ago. And I had my closest friend when I was growing up, I was like in 5th grade, who passed away. But I mean, I've had relatively nothing in the way of hardships, let alone tragedies. And we were talking about that no more than 4 or 5 days before the most unimaginable tragedy happened. So to say that I was unprepared, yeah, I mean, there are people who grow up with this, and it's incredible. I mean, it's, and you wonder. I mean, 2 of my daughters are in long-term relationships, and one of them's father passed away. My daughter's fiance's father, who I'd gotten to know very well, was a great, great person, passed away 2 years ago in March. And my other daughter, her boyfriend of 3 years, his mom passed away only 3 months before my wife passed away. So there's all this just going on with my kids. And so they'd sort of been around it. Of everybody, I was probably the least prepared to deal with anything.
You have articulated to me before that you handled everything, that you couldn't do any of the things that you were doing professionally. You wouldn't have had the ability to do much of anything. Who was Kim?
Well, she was a lot of things, but the biggest thing I think is she was, and I think this was pretty much what came up at her service and talking to people. She was the kindest person that I've ever known. And, you know, my wife was the person that she would go into a room or be at an event, and what she was always looking for is who was off by themselves, who didn't have anybody to talk to. And that's where she would go immediately. Like, we would be at these events and there would be, all these people with big names and everything else. Like, she didn't care about any of that. She'd be looking for she's by herself. I'm going to go talk to her. I had one of the wives of an analytics person that we had in Detroit wrote me a letter after she passed, and she said, the thing that she remembered is my wife got very active there in Detroit, and they had a families group. It was mainly wives and girlfriends, but Reggie Jackson's brother, Kim, talked him into coming, and he was there. But she said, she's always nervous, she said, because we're like the low person on the totem pole. But from the very first time that group got together, she said it was amazing. She goes, Kim treated me like the star player's girlfriend. Like, we were all the same and in this together. Kim did not care one whit about status. It just didn't mean anything to her. She actually thought it was funny that people would revere some people over others simply because of the money they had or the job they had or anything else. It made no sense to her. All she cared about is, are you a nice person? Do I like you? Do I not like you? Like, that's all she cared about. And she was just kind to everybody. We were, another thing, like, on our, probably the day we got back from Italy, we're sitting out back, as we did every evening. We'd sit out there, and she asked me, what do you think your purpose is in life? And as you know, I can do, Dan, I talked for like 10 minutes, and it was beautiful. I wish you could have heard it. Great oratory about my purpose in life, and using my platform. It was very highfalutin and very self-impressed. And then I turned to her and I said, what do you think your purpose in life is? And she said, to be nice to everybody I see and make their day a little bit better. And I just sat there and it was like, shit, like, that's a lot better purpose than what I have. And it was summed up that quickly. The other thing that came up with Kim, and I got this letter, Kim and I worked with a group of men in a college and prison program at Tomoka Correctional Institute in Daytona. And we had been doing that we started before the pandemic, so we'd been doing it quite a while. But unfortunately, some of those guys, probably half our group is people who are in for life. And so some of those guys had been there that whole time. And this one guy, Earl, wrote me a letter afterwards and said that, and I'll never forget this line, if you think about their prison outfits, and he said, from the first day I met Kim, she never saw my blues. She just saw me as a person. And that to me sums her up, because she didn't see people as lower than her. And she also didn't see people as above her. She wasn't intimidated by anybody, because she just never, that wasn't what was important to her at all, And so she treated everybody well and treated everybody the same. And man, I still have people in Detroit where she really started to be able to have some control because of my position and do things in a team atmosphere that she thought were important. In the summer, like once every 3 weeks, we lived on a lake, and she would just put out a blanket invitation to everybody on our staff, like, come, bring the kids. People would come all day. They'd be out on jet skis, paddle boards, hanging out. And I remember we're hanging out one day, and it's with my assistant coaches and our general manager and the whole thing. And after a while, I realized I haven't seen Kim in a while. And she's over playing on a little beach area with a little girl of, one of our scouts who was there, just helping them out so they could go grab something to eat. I mean, that was her all the way. I mean, she was the best. And we had signs made up for my kids and I at Christmas, because she had this saying she would say to me all the time, because I'm an argumentative person. I always want to debate the issues and everything. And I think she came up with the saying on her own, but then she would, because of me, but then she would use it for everybody. It's more important to be kind than to be right. And she would say it to me, God damn, at least once a week. We'd be in some argument, or I'd be in an argument with somebody else, and she would say, it's more important to be kind than to be right. All the time. That's who she was.
It's nice seeing you again, buddy. It's always nice seeing you.
I appreciate you giving me this opportunity and to talk about this, because I really, other than with my therapist, I haven't talked about this stuff. Plus, to be with somebody who I like and who I know is going through the same thing. Situations might be a little bit different, but one of the things I've learned is don't try to calibrate people's grief and everything else. Like, you don't compare it. You just realize that we're going through it. And it's rough when we lose the people that we love, and we have to recalibrate our whole lives. I mean, we really do. Our whole life is different. I look at my kids and I'm like, man, I mean, my wife was the person they relied on. I mean, literally called her every day, because, they relied on her advice on very practical matters. She was the person they went to with emotional problems. Their whole life's changed now. They got to find different people to fill those voids, and I can fill some of it, but not anywhere near all of it.
I'm assuming that you have even more of an appreciation, though, for your kids now, because there's something about this that sort of alters you and makes you realize how precious and fragile these things are.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, it just, I think about them every morning. I mean, I always stayed in close touch with them, but I literally text them every morning just to tell them what's going on with my day. Hope you have a good day. I let them know what times, like they know I'm over here now, so that if they needed me, like, you're not going to be able to reach me by phone right now, but you'll be able to reach me later. That's why I do it. I mean, because I know the void that they feel, and thank God they have each other, but it'll just never be the same for any of us. Like, it won't be the same for you without your brother. I mean, these are just relationships that we don't have. My therapist does say to me all the time, and I don't know if you feel this or not, but he says this to me all the time: they'll always be in your lives and you'll always love them. He said, it's like, if he tells me all the time, you loved Kim, and you guys would be sitting in a room. When she got up and went to the other room, you didn't stop loving her because you weren't there with her. This is going to be a longer period of time, but it's the same thing. You don't quit loving and caring about that person because they're not in the room with you anymore. And I try to keep that in mind as much as I can.
And the love's alive through the kids, through the relationship with the kids. And the love's alive when you just tell the stories of like 3 and 4 days before she was gone. Yeah. You're remembering like these
and I see her in the
snapshots.
kids. I do. I'll see them and I'll tell them, man, you're so much like your wife. And my oldest daughter now who never, by the way, did a damn thing around the house when she lived with us. Never. Wouldn't even pick up her dirty clothes, let alone anything else. Now she has her own house, and she's like this unbelievable do-it-yourself person. I mean, she redoes her whole bathroom on her own and does all these jobs. And my wife was big on that. I would always say, "Oh, just hire somebody," and my wife's like, "Why would I hire somebody? The joy I get in doing it, I get no joy in doing anything. I get joy in having it done." But she did that, and so I see my daughter, and I'll say, "Man, you're so much like your mom," and so I still see her in them all the time.
Has your therapist given you anything that can help with blaming yourself? Is there anything?
I mean, he tries to get me in that case to be more rational and to understand what the mental health professionals are telling me. Him and who also he was. My wife and I did stuff with him. That's how I got the connection. We did couples therapy with him, so he knew my wife, and also my wife's psychiatrist I talked to or texted with at the time, and so to understand what the mental health professionals are telling me, that he said, "Stan, this is mental illness is an illness just like cancer is an illness or anything else. Your wife died from an illness." And I do think that the more we can get to understand mental illness in that regard, I mean, as a society, it will help us in this, because we sort of push it to the side like it's different than real, but it's chemical, it's in the brain. It's not the idea that it's just the way you think and things like that. It's not. I mean, yeah, some of it's controllable by therapy, but there's chemical, biological changes that affect the brain and the way people think. And we've got to understand that better. And getting me to just tap into that and understand it, like I say, it helps. When I get off the phone, I understand but making that transformation from my head to my gut is going to be the challenge.
I'm sorry that you're going through it, buddy. I've been wanting to hug you for a while. I love you. Thank you for always being a friend to me, to the show, to all of the people here, to our listeners. They have developed a relationship with you of admiration and respect. So thank you for being who you are around us, with us, and for us.
Thank you. And thank you for your friendship. And I said to you before, walking in, I haven't been in these studios, and walking in and seeing this, and my admiration for you and what you've done for so many other people, where you could have relaxed, taken your money, either been in retirement or just worked for somebody else and made a good living. And I know you, and I know part of why you did this. It wasn't a ego trip for you to have this company. You did this to help other people, the people who work for you in here, the people you've put on the air and put in podcasts. And I know you take great pride in that. And as a friend of yours, it's something that I really appreciate about you. You've developed those relationships because you care about the people around you, me included. I mean, you put me on the air the first year I was out of coaching, and I think that got other people interested in me. Like you've done that for people consistently, when you could have made it a lot easier on yourself and just been about you. And so I'll always appreciate that.
Couldn't get the damn radio station to pay you. Had to write you the checks myself. And then you refused to take them from me. And so I had to write them to the radio station so that the radio station would pay you, because they didn't want to pay you. And now look at you at the top of the industry, kicking ass, because you really are great at it, Stan. It is a pleasure. I don't know that my wife can give a higher compliment than sort of like being delighted. She doesn't care about sports, like could not possibly care any less. So when she hears your voice and says, "Is that Stan?" I'm not sure she could do it for any other broadcaster. Maybe Boog Shambi, but I'm not totally sure.
Well, Boog's way ahead of me, both as a person and a broadcaster. We both know that. But yeah, it's fun for me, especially like now, like doing these Heat games lately, is I'll get texts from wives of coaches and staff members with the Heat just saying, and I know they're not huge fans. They care because it's their husband's jobs. and they'll just, oh, it's great hearing you on the air and the whole thing. That's fun, and I hope to run into some wives and families tonight of guys that I coached here and worked with and everything.
It seems more enjoyable than the coaching job. Not as fulfilling, probably, but it seems like it's more fun.
Well, there's a lot less stress. I remember my brother saying years ago, he said, hey, look, when the broadcast is over, so the only thing I think about is where we eating. And so that part is true. And you know what is fun? Like, this, Dan, if I were coaching a game tonight, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be seeing you.
You would be impossible to talk to.
Yes.
You would be unpleasant.
Yes,
you would
I
be surly, distracted, or focused on something else.
I mean, yesterday, Steve Clifford happened to be in town for something else. I spend the afternoon with him and my brother. I wouldn't be doing that if I was coaching. I want to see, if I can, Malik Allen and Karan Butler's families tonight at the game. I've got to text both of them. I wouldn't do that if I were coaching. So there are some really, really good things besides the fact that I enjoy the job and love the people I'm working with. Lifestyle-wise, there are some things that are really good, where I get to see some people and reconnect with some people that I really care about and that my wife really cared about.
The NBA playoffs are on TNT. He is one of the best doing it, one of the best people doing it, one of the best broadcasters doing it. I will thank you again, and I will remind you that I am happy that you are out of coaching because you were a miserable fuck when you were coaching. It was just a misery. Like, do you understand? You'd come into town, I'd want to see my friend. My friend's too miserable to see me.
I do understand that, and I do appreciate the fact that even in the coaching years, maybe not as much, but even in the coaching years, you're one of the few people in this world who could get me to laugh.
You were not accessible during the coaching years. There was no.
That's not true.
There was no.
You were one of the few guys
okay.
I would come on the air with.
All
maybe
right.
not as much as you wanted, but I would come on the air.
You would. Okay, fair enough. I sound like I lack gratitude. I will say to you that when you said looking across the court at your brother in Houston and seeing where it is you'd arrived, when you look at what it is that we've built here, almost every day I feel a measure of that. You talk about the pressure of 45 or 50 employees. We have 45 now here in New York, and it is an overwhelming responsibility. But I will take your words of you have to enjoy it while you have it because you will miss it while you are gone. And when I do come in here, I feel some of what you articulated when you were looking at your brother and being like, how is this even possible? I give sports opinions. Like I used to, I was writing for the Miami Herald. How was any of this possible?
I remember when you first went on the radio, like you hadn't done radio before. And I've said this to you too. The only thing I miss about your career is I miss you as a writer. I do.
I miss me as a writer too.
I mean, I thought the one, I still have memories. You wrote years ago a Father's Day column about you pitching and the whole thing. And like that has stuck with me, Dan. How many years ago was that?
A long time ago.
I mean, you were such a powerful writer and I miss that about you. But I mean, you've evolved and this is all great. And you've helped a lot more people than you ever could have in their profession by continuing to write. But I remember, I'll be one of the few people because as you started the show with, I am old. And so I'm one of the few people who actually remembers you as a writer. And I appreciate that part of your professional life.
And in putting a bow on it, right? Because you say that you appreciated that I could take it as well as give it. You're not going to remember this probably, but I think one of the first conversations that we ever had where it was you being mad at me about something was, and I think the statute of limitations is up on this, and so I can reveal it without it being anything too intimate. You were mad at me because at the time I was writing, I wince thinking about this, but it was when you had left the Heat coaching job and Pat Riley was about to be in the coaching job, and I was writing, even Stan Van Gundy would say that Pat Riley is a better coach than Stan Van Gundy, and you're like, don't put words in my mouth.
Yeah, I didn't say that. And listen, the one thing is, and that goes to another thing, Dan, is The question I get all the time about coaching in the NBA, and this will go to that disagreement where I said, no, I don't think that. Is people always ask me, how do you deal with the egos in the NBA? And I say this pretty truthfully too, is, well, I just make sure mine's bigger than theirs. Like, you don't get into these kind of businesses, and you too, we really get down to it. We can be good people and have gratitude and care about other people, but we've also got egos. These are competitive businesses, and you got to have an ego. And I certainly have one, and exercised it more as a coach. And no, I'm not admitting somebody's better than
But
me.
I just love that you could like stop writing that. Stop.
Yeah, don't say that. I remember that. And I remember having that conversation. And it was before the decision had been made. You know, there was that we had lost in the game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals to Detroit. Painful. And Pat had said some things about being more involved, and he wanted to be a coaching president. And then your paper, not you, but your paper was running actually polls on who should be the coach of the Heat next year. And you had written a column saying, you weren't saying that I shouldn't coach, but you were saying, yeah, but even Stan Van Gundy would admit. And I said, hell no. Hell no.
I do love you, buddy. I will say it again.
I love you too.